The night shift at the hospital that nobody will talk about. A nurse stepped onto a hospital floor at 11 p.m., and by sunrise, 3 patients who were perfectly stable were gone. Not transferred, not discharged, gone. That's the rumor whispered through one hospital in a small Midwest town, the one the staff calls the floor that doesn't sleep. Nobody likes to work the night shift on the 4th floor. Nobody likes to talk about what happened there in the spring of 2014. But one nurse kept a notebook, and what she wrote in it, the hospital still doesn't want anybody to read. By the end of this story, the reason might keep you awake too, because some shifts never really end. So how did the strange shift start? With a normal Monday. Megan Hales was 27 years old, a registered nurse with 3 years of experience, freshly hired at St. Andrew's Regional Hospital. The 4th floor handled patients who were stable enough to leave the ICU but still needed monitoring. Most nights, the shift was quiet, vital checks, medication rounds, charting, coffee at 2 a.m. But on her very first night, the senior nurse pulled her aside and gave her a strange warning. If a patient asks you to leave the door cracked open, do it. If a patient asks you to close the door fully, do that too. But never, ever switch them around. Megan thought it was a joke. By the 3rd night, she wasn't laughing, because the patterns she started to notice on that floor weren't normal. And the man in room 412 was the strangest of all. So who was in room 412? An elderly man named Mr. Petrov, 81 years old, pneumonia recovery. Quiet, polite, sharp memory. Every night, he asked Megan the same question at 3:14 a.m. exactly. Is the door cracked, nurse? She always answered yes. He always thanked her with a small nod and closed his eyes. On the 4th night, Megan was charting at the desk when she glanced up at the clock. 3:14 a.m. The light above Mr. Petrov's room blinked twice. She walked over. The door was closed, fully. She didn't remember closing it. She cracked it open a few inches, just like Mr. Petrov asked. Inside, he looked up at her, his face pale. Came in tonight, he whispered. Through the closed door. It thought I was asleep. Megan asked him what came in. He didn't answer. He just stared at the foot of his bed. The space was empty, but the chair beside it was facing the door. And she was sure it had been facing the window an hour earlier. The chill that ran through Megan that night never quite left her shoulders. And the next part of the story, the part she wrote in her notebook, is where things stopped feeling like coincidence. What happened on the 7th night? 3 new patients arrived on the floor. All stable, all recovering, all assigned to rooms 408, 410, and 414. None of them were on the danger list. Megan checked vitals at midnight. All normal. She checked again at 2 a.m. Normal. At 3:14 a.m., every light on the floor flickered for half a second. Just half a second. The senior nurse looked up from her desk and didn't say a word. She just stood and walked down the hall, checking each door. 408. Cracked. 410. Closed. 414. Cracked. And she came back, sat down, and whispered to Megan, "Whatever you do, don't go in 410 alone." Megan asked why. The senior nurse stared at her chart for a long time. Then she said, "The last nurse who never came back to work the night shift again." Megan wrote that line in her notebook word for word. And before the sun came up, she would understand exactly what it meant. What did Megan see at 3:42 a.m.? The call light from 410 came on. Megan looked across the hall. The senior nurse was busy with another patient. The light kept blinking. Procedure said to respond within 5 minutes. Megan stood up. Her hand felt cold on the doorframe. She knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open. The patient inside was a woman in her 60s, sleeping deeply, her chest rising and falling. The room looked normal. The four-stand was where it should be. The curtain was half drawn, but the chair beside the bed was facing the door, just like Mr. Petrov's had. Megan checked the patient's pulse, slow but steady. She turned to leave, and as she stepped out into the hallway, she heard the patient say, plain and clear behind her, "Don't close the door all the way." Megan froze. She had not seen the woman's lips move. She had been asleep. Megan didn't turn back. She closed the door to a crack. She did not close it all the way. Her hands shook as she walked back to the nurse's desk. The senior nurse looked up and nodded once, like a teacher whose student just passed a test. Megan didn't speak the rest of the shift. And in the morning, 3 rooms on the floor were quiet. 3 rooms were not. What did Megan find out about the floor over the next weeks? She started asking questions. The orderlies told her the 4th floor used to be a psychiatric wing back in the 1960s. The old equipment was stored in the basement. The walls were repainted twice. The room numbers were changed, but the layout never changed. Old maps still showed which rooms had been padded. Room 410, room 412, and room 414 were 3 of them. Megan also learned that the original wing had been shut down after a string of unexplained patient deaths in 1962. The hospital quietly rebuilt the floor in 1971 and never spoke of the original purpose again. But the staff who worked nights for years all knew the same rules. Some doors stayed cracked, some stayed closed, and nobody, ever, switched them around. Megan wrote everything down. She also wrote down the names of every patient who had passed away on the floor since she started. 12 names in 8 weeks. 8 of them between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. The pattern was real, and the floor knew it. But the most chilling night was still ahead. What happened on her last shift? On a quiet Thursday in late spring, Megan came in for her usual shift. The senior nurse wasn't there. The new floater nurse ignored Megan's warning about the door rule. "Just ghost stories," she laughed. At 3 a.m., she walked into room 412 and shut the door completely. Before Megan could stop her, every light on the 4th floor went out. 9 seconds of total darkness. When the lights returned, the floater nurse was standing in the hallway, shaking uncontrollably. Mr. Petrov was gone. The bed was empty. The window was locked, and the chair beside the bed was facing the door. The floater nurse quit before sunrise. Megan resigned 3 weeks later. She never worked nights again. The truth about the 4th floor was never really about ghosts. It was about the rules nurses whispered to each other when the halls went quiet. Some doors stayed cracked, some stayed shut, and everyone working night shift learned the same thing by week 2. Listen to the patients, even the ones who shouldn't be speaking, especially them, because they knew what walked the hallway at 3:14 a.m. And once you hear a door close by itself up there, you never forget the sound. Megan still keeps that notebook hidden away. She hasn't opened it in years. But every single night at 3:14, she still wakes up and checks her bedroom door. If this story gave you chills, like and subscribe for more stories that should have stayed untold.